Friends, long ago there lived a hermit in a forest, and he had forsaken his family. He was staying away from them and he would hardly communicate with them. So he had no contacts with the society and no contacts with his family member as well. However, there was one person, his close relative, who would get him food in the morning and then the hermit would eat it in the afternoon, and the evening he would throw out the waste. Now you might wonder how this story is related to hermetically sealed compressor. Well, let me tell you, let us relate this. In a hermetically sealed compressor, there is a compressor body and motor which is totally cut off from the surrounding by a shell, steel shell. However, there is an opening which communicates, which brings in the vapor refrigerant at low pressure and low temperature into the compressor body, and there is one more line which discharges the high pressure refrigerant at high temperature to the condenser. So there is the communication inside and there is a communication outside. Since the compressor body is surrounded with a shell, there is absolutely no noise coming out of this compressor, and second thing, there is no leakage problem. In all, this is a very interesting equipment, and we are going to learn it for its theoretical as well as practical aspects. Stay tuned. Hello friends, in this session we are going to learn about hermetic compressor. Hermetic compressor consists of a shell, then this is the top portion of the shell, you can call it dome, and then there is a bottom portion of the shell. Inside this fitted a motor and rotor assembly. Then there is a stator winding, and then there is a compressor body here. Compressor has connecting rod, piston, cylinder and a crank. Then the supply is given to this motor through relay and OLP. OLP stands for overload protector, and then the connection is set to the outside this source of power. There is an opening here called which communicates to the evaporator. It's called suction line, and then there is a charging line here. Through this, the refrigerant can be charged whenever the refrigerant quantity inside the compressor reduces, inside the system reduces, it can be charged from outside. Then there is a delivery line through which the refrigerant at high pressure and high temperature is given to the condenser. Now this entire motor and compressor assembly is mounted using springs. Two springs have been shown here, and the model which we are going to study after this will have 4 springs. So it's mounted on 4 springs. Springs help in reducing the vibrations transmitted to the body of the compressor, and this consequently reduces the noise. Now at the bottom of the shell there is lubricating oil which helps in lubricating the various parts of the compressor. So when the motor runs, some lubricating oil gets splashed inside the motor and it lubricates the various parts of the compressor. And then besides this, now see, this entire portion, this empty portion is occupied by low pressure and low temperature refrigerant. As you can see, it's written here. Now friends, let's understand how this particular compressor functions and why it is called hermetically sealed or hermetic. Well, the suction line, through the suction line, low pressure and low temperature vapor refrigerant enters the dome, and then it cools the winding. Otherwise there is no way to cool the winding. So winding is cooled here, which otherwise generates a lot of heat, and then this is sucked, the refrigerant is sucked. There is an opening here through which the refrigerant is sucked into the compressor during suction stroke. Intake valve remains open through which the refrigerant is admitted into the cylinder, while the delivery valve remains closed. During the next stroke of the compressor, the delivery valve remains open and the suction valve is closed, and the compressed refrigerant is allowed to pass through muffler or silencer, where undue noise is reduced, and then the compressed refrigerant at high pressure and high temperature is delivered through this delivery line to the condenser. Friends, in this case, one more silencing arrangement can be provided at the suction side, and then that can be called the silencer or muffler at the suction. Now, since this is totally sealed, the inside of this compressor has no communication with the outside, so the noise does not escape. That is the main advantage of this. So it doesn't make noise as a whole. And second thing, there are no chances of leakage of the refrigerant. For these two reasons, this is preferred in small units like domestic refrigerators, and then water coolers, freezers, and even in air conditioners. Well friends, in this session we are going to learn about the practical parts of a hermetically sealed compressor. Well, this is the bottom shell of the hermetically sealed compressor. There is a top shell as well which fits over this, and now this is provided with a suction line which is communicated to the evaporator, and then there is a discharge line, this line, which communicates with the condenser, and there is a charging line here through which charging of the refrigerant is done. And then inside there are, as you can see, four springs are there. Besides this, the bottom portion of the dome, the bottom portion of this shell is filled with the lubricating oil, and onto this a compressor body is fitted. Then there are three terminals here for a common starting and running, and this terminal, onto this fitted the relay and the OLP. This is nothing but the base of the compressor, or it can be called leg of the compressor. Then here is the stator winding. This stator winding, as you can see, it fits onto this like this. It fits here, and then it has winding and stator. This is supplied with outside electricity through OLP and relay. Then besides this, there is a actual compressor body here. This is the compressor head. Let us remove these bolts, and you can see inside there is a plate. This is the delivery valve of the compressor, and then there is one more plate inside. This is nothing but the suction valve, and once you remove this, you have a here cylinder. This is the cylinder, and inside there is a piston. Now besides this, there is a rotor here. Around the rotor there is a stator winding, and which provide the sufficient field to turn this. Now besides this, you can see here, this is the this is connecting rod, and then this is cylinder. This is the crooked portion of the crankshaft. So when this turns, when this crankshaft turns, that time the piston is taken to and fro, up and down. Now besides this, there's a muffler here at the exhaust side. Now friends, let us try to understand how this particular hermetically sealed compressor functions. Let me start from the suction line. As I said earlier, this is the suction line. It carries the low pressure, low temperature refrigerant from the evaporator. The same refrigerant enters here, and it cools the winding of the stator. Otherwise there is no way to cool the stator winding. It generates a lot of heat, and then through this, as you can see here, through this portion the refrigerant enters inside the compressor, and the suction valve opens. This suction valve will open now, allowing the refrigerant to move inside, and then during the next stroke the same refrigerant is being compressed, and then the same is sent back. The compressed refrigerant is sent back, sent into this muffler provided at the external, provided at the exit side of the compressor, and then there's an opening here to which the delivery line is connected, and then finally the delivery line is connected to this small tube, and through this small tube the high pressure, high temperature refrigerant is delivered to the condenser. So this is how the entire compressor functions. Now besides this, as I told you earlier, there are three terminals here which are meant for fitting a relay and the OLP. Now one is the common, the other is start, and the third is running. Friends, there is a provision for providing lubricating oil here. So when the motor starts, the lubricating oil gets splashed inside, and it lubricates the various parts, various components of the compressor. Now since the entire compressor body is isolated from the surrounding, there is obviously no noise. Moreover, the chances of leakage are almost nil. For these two reasons, this particular compressor is preferred. However, at the same time, if there is some problem inside the shell of the compressor, then there is no way but to cut it open. You will have to cut it. That is the biggest disadvantage of this. This compressor is used in refrigerators, domestic refrigerators, then freezers, then water coolers, and in air conditioners as well.